We all land on this earth without having given our consent. And I think if many of us had the opportunity to give consent, many probably actually wouldn't, particularly those with chronic illness and those living in poverty. Obviously, we have moments of great joy that keep us going, and we also have some really hard times. But many are miserable and want a way out but can't get out. Some seek meaning in life through their family, through work, through recreation, things like this. Now, I'll admit, I'm inclined just to spit some research at you, listing the demerits of classism and racism. But I won't, mostly because that's not my goal. What I will say is mothers are the key to change, I believe, and to a lesser degree fathers. But the family in general is highly important. A healthy mother is a healthy baby, and a healthy baby is a healthy child, who is likely to succeed in school and life. But this conversation is for another time. Now, I'm just listing some ideas here. It takes money to make money. When I started my second business, at my 9-month review, I had turned a profit, and I was given a grant, and they were overjoyed because I was the first to do this in the program. But they didn't teach me to leverage money, they didn't teach me marketing, they didn't even give me advice on how to spend the grant money. But I had everything I needed, I knew how to make bags, I just couldn't sell them because I couldn't connect with my customers. But what I'm getting at is these are skills that you learn if you have money. So there are lots of ways that money perpetuates itself. Crime, it can funnel people to more crime because it's harder to get a job if you have a record. Also, sometimes crime just pays better than a minimum wage job, which might be all you could get if you had dropped out of school. Maybe your mom wasn't good at school and she can't help you. Now, this may seem anecdotal and circumstantial even, but that's the point. A few other examples of why a person might drop out might be the lack of the culture. The cultures in poor areas often don't reinforce learning. Maybe you were bullied. Maybe you stayed in school for sports, but now you are permanently injured. There's lots of reasons, really, but one of the largest is lack of education. And there is a complex set of reasons poor areas are also the worst in educational achievement. Poor schools have significantly lower numbers of teachers with advanced degrees, lower scores on standardized tests, much higher dropout rates, and so it takes resiliency and a bounty of insulating factors to excel at education, in poor areas especially. I believe in the importance of education. Sports, music, movies, the arts, they're all incredibly important. But moving beyond the simple paradigm of consumption out of boredom, also real genuine enjoyment, there's an even more important reason for entertainment, and that is hope. Entertainment lightens the soul. There can be an aspect of hero worship, of course, and sometimes people check out when life is tough. It's similar to dissociation without the physiological characteristics, and living in poverty or in a dangerous neighborhood affects people's mental health, their physical health, and how they spend their time. People look for ways out. Some try to leave through a proverbial trapdoor. If education is not an option, they look for other means of escape, and the pursuit of fame may seem to be the only option. I'm not saying fame is an easier out than education, but someone can practice singing or piano at a local church or school. They can play basketball and football in school and on neighborhood teams. They can practice every day. Unlike education, physical predispositions are necessary, as are a plethora of chance events aligning. A person must be discovered or scouted. They must have the chops for singing or body type for athletics. But psychologically, it would seem easier to practice every day at a socially acceptable and venerated path, as in fame, than at an out that is not reinforced in the media and local ethos. Are academics and fame the only way out of poverty? In many ways, these exits are the only doors out of poverty. Since minimum wage or even upper-lower class wages do not provide means to save regularly. Of course, some jobs are a means out of poverty. Consider this. You work at a factory because it's the only job you could get with a high school degree. You advance by working long hours. If you become a middle manager, you may make $35,000 a year. Maybe you are a PCA. As a manager, you might make $28,000 a year, but you have no time to enjoy life. You work, you sleep, and you have a few hours in between. If you're no good at school, and a factory or some other unskilled profession is your only option, fame would seem a pretty good option. You focus on fame as you're out, and this seems much easier to you than education, due to the hyper-focus on these people. In concept, with increased exposure, it seems more likely compared to education than with the lack of exposure. Part of this is due to the cost benefit. The education track could lead to maybe $65,000 a year with college, but you don't see anyone who this has happened to, because these people have moved out. But famous people might make $1 million a year or more, and you see them every time you watch a music video or watch a game. By focusing on the placating fame option, you hold out hope for this to happen. You never mobilize to educate yourself or change your environment. You are too tired at night. Basically, there are two possibilities for escape from poverty: fame and education. But really, very few people do make it out. And many that would be at relative unrest are put at ease by focusing on an outcome that is entirely unlikely at best and nearly impossible at worst. People who do get out via the more likely option of education receive very little coverage, and so they exist in basic anonymity. The exposure of fame brings many people who have even a slight chance of escape to focus on an entirely unlikely option of escape than the more likely possibility of escape by education. So in essence, fame perpetuates poverty and classism. What would I suggest? My suggestion would be to venerate those who succeed in life through probable means. So what I'm saying is, essentially, if you succeed at education, you should be venerated. Billionaires should be venerated. Fame should be less venerated. Of course, this is absurd, since the whole point of fame is that some unlikely possibility has occurred. But perhaps billionaires and high-end millionaires should be talked up more and biographies made about their journey. Think, if billionaires became the new movie star and the fact they worked incredibly hard to educate themselves, it could change things. The goal is to create the same hyper-focus on education as exists for fame. I believe the lack of focus on ending poverty and racism is directly comparable to the colonial imperialism we saw hundreds of years ago. Concepts such as gentrification, classism, poverty, etc. are tactics to maintain cheap production. Even though fame can provide means to escape poverty, more people aspire to fame than achieve it, and so these people are not mobilizing to secure equal opportunity. Further, if an individual has no energy except to check out after work, they are unable to mobilize. I believe the 2020 election will bring real change. Opportunities for the poor will materialize. I believe universal basic income could have profound effects on disparity in class, because suddenly an entire generation forward would be freed from the impoverishment in the early years, which this is how poverty transmits. It is one of the primary means of both enslaving the working class and a major predictor of future success. Success in the early years is, in life course models, one of the primary factors that determines a person's outcome. So in summary, fame is a method within the systems of classism and racism. I do not propose that fame, sports, music, movies be abolished. In no way. These are important elements of our society. In fact, I suggest a new class being added to this list: the massively wealthy. I believe by venerating this class, people aspire to that end, and those who fall off along the way will be better because they had aspired. They had aspired to education. They had aspired towards hard work. They had been willing to go the way. It will take a concerted effort by the influencers, To make this happen, the outcome, a more able workforce, higher wages and spending, and people who are better off than before.